how's it going, everyone? Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Music Reviewer Podcast. My name's Josh, I'm the music reviewer, and today we will be covering another album in our album review series. Today is going to be episode 14, and I am going to be covering the latest album by Phoebe Bridgers, Punisher. Before we get started, I just want to let everyone know that the latest album review was the latest excellent work by Pottery, titled "Welcome to Bobby's Motel." That one was a bit of a surprise for me. Really great album. If you're interested in that band or that album, please check that review out. I also have some reviews before that I released for last week, or technically this week's best and worst track of the week. That one seems to be doing well in the grand scheme of things. So, um, if you guys like that series, thank you. I'll keep on making more of those videos. And yeah, let's get into this Phoebe Bridgers album. So it seems like I'm probably going to have a little bit to say about this album review. So yeah, let's get into this Phoebe Bridgers album. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about who Phoebe Bridgers is. Phoebe Bridgers is an American singer-songwriter from LA. She gained traction in 2017 with her debut album Stranger in the Alps. Prior to that, I think she was sort of like an independent artist that kind of caught a break when she met Ryan Adams, or Ryan Adams caught her attention or something like that. Um, and was she released an album on his label. There's some controversy going on uh, with that sort of relationship. Important thing is that Phoebe Bridgers did gain some traction in 2017 when she released her album on another record label separately from that one that Ryan Adams put her music on. And after that, she sort of became like a like a sort of sweetheart in the indie blogosphere and all that. She's got a lot of positive press, and then later she formed the supergroup after releasing that album Stranger in the Alps called um, Boy Genius. Boy Genius was I guess, a collective with some of her contemporaries such as Julian Baker, Lucy Dacus, which are also up and coming singer songwriters in the indie, I guess, indie blogosphere world, that make similar music, but Phoebe's a little bit in her own little niche. Um, Julian Baker's more of like this, I guess, this more of like singer songwriter base, less rock influenced. Lucy Dacus, I haven't really heard much of her, but it seems like she's more on the rock side. Anyways, Boy Genius was critically acclaimed in that one album they released. It coincided with the Me Too movement, and with that being an all-female band, it kind of promoted this awareness revolving around that movement. But Bridgers proved herself, and it seems that she could be, I guess, versatile and form other projects, such as Better Oblivion Community Center with Conrad Oberst of Bright Eyes fame and his own venture. I'm not a huge Conor Oberst fan, not that I don't like his music, I just have never gotten into it. Probably just because of my own laziness. I just haven't picked up many of his albums and listened. I do recognize some of his songs with Bright Eyes, but I would say that I actually caught Better Oblivion Community Center caught my attention with me not even knowing who was in that band. I remember listening to some of their stuff without even knowing Phoebe Bridgers or Copper Obos were in there. I just thought it was just this duo that was making some pretty cool music at the time. Anyways, that project caught some traction, and now here we are. Phoebe Bridgers released her sophomore album, Punisher, um, and it's a little bit of a unique situation with Miss Bridgers because um, she's such a unique talent that could fit into different mini projects like she's proven, but she can still remain focused and release unique music on her own venture under the name Phoebe Bridgers. Her music is kind of like a brand of folk with hints of Americana, pop, and indie rock. And what makes her music industry interesting, I'm sorry, is this pure, candid nature to it. And when you combined like the way she uses her lyrics to tell a story with this authentic nature, and then her light and angelic vocal tone. There's like a distinct nature to her music, I think. Um, Now, with that being said, there's obvious influences and similarities to contemporaries that are in that genre that she's in, this folk indie kind of thing, which is fine. All artists have influences, but I think Phoebe Bridgers is set to eventually become an artist that probably doesn't need to follow a certain sound or trend. Think maybe like Fiona Apple or Bjork. So yeah, straight. And I'll go back and talk a little bit right now about her debut album, "Stranger in the Alps." This album was a little bit more straightforward with the tracks. There was things thrown in there like the song "Georgia" that seemed to appeal more to like the norms in contemporary laid-back alternative and indie rock at the time. Think Lumineers or Vance Joy. And then there's also songs that have hints of alternative country with tracks like Would You Rather on that album. And I think this brings up an interesting topic with Phoebe Bridgers' music, which she can be versatile enough to have something sound like alternative country, which is, if you're not too experienced with alternative country, not many people are, it's basically country without the Nashville. So it's like the actual hillbilly shit, you know. Um, and um, and then yeah, the other track Georgia on there was like radio friendly, almost alternative. And I think maybe those tracks were put on there to see what did better, maybe streaming wise, and what Phoebe Bridgers can gravitate towards commercially. I'm not sure. I That's just a speculation. But it seems like in Punisher, all that bullshit was cut out. It seems like she just did whatever the fuck she wanted in this album. It's a little bit less friendly. It still has plenty elements of pop, but it just seems like there was like a quirky and weirdness that she went with. And you can easily kind of tell that with kind of like her aesthetic. She kind of like anytime she's in the public eye, she wears like this skeleton suit, this onesie thing. That could just be to appeal to the Punisher theme, but I think it's also tells a little bit more about her quirkiness. And this isn't really like a fun, quirky album. It's actually very serious. But that could just be maybe it's just her portraying some sort of counterbalance to that with with a little bit of the different weird things going on in this album, and immediately you do see that in the first main track, "Garden Song." DVD Menu is technically the first track, but it's more of an interlude track. It's this pretty string melody type thing. There's some weird noises and tones. Uh, it's something that's done in numerous albums, but "Garden Song" is the official first song. It's probably one of the most commercially successful on this album. You hear it a lot on contemporary indie radio. There's like a gently plucked guitar on it. It has a nice like color, and there's these really pitched down vocals that like are maybe two or three octaves down from Phoebe's like actual melody like range that have like this deep demonic undertone to it in the track, and that's what I mean by what's weird in this album. Stuff like that you don't see anyone doing it. You would think it sounds bad, but it actually kind of works. So yeah, there's like this weird stutter synth in the track. It's like this and sampled bits in there. The guitar is tastefully used. There's some harp, I think, thrown in the chorus or something like that that follows the vocal line. Uh, the song has many subtle details. It works as a song, and it's very, I guess, accessible too. That's why I think it's the first song on the album, but there's some weird quirkiness to it. Um, but in my opinion, maybe like my personal favorite on this whole entire album, just because I'm a sucker for stuff like this, is Kyoto. I like the drum sounds in there automatically. The drum set here sounds more alive than it was in the previous project. There's some lovely warm production in the track. There's some melodic horns thrown in the chorus, gives it a nice touch. The vocal harmonies are pretty, and there's a melodic motif that recurs a lot in this track. It's immediately at the beginning, you can hear it. It has a nice and joyful, energetic mood to the track, perhaps the most energetic in the whole entire album. The lyrical content here gets a little abstract. It seems like it's something that's deeply personal to Bridgers on a particular relationship. I didn't look too deeply into that, but I thought Kyoto was nice. It was more of like a rock type, indie rock type track. Um, and I think the next track that I found interesting was two tracks later, Halloween. This one has like a nice, tranquil folk-like aesthetic. It has like these a lot electronic embellishments that color the track in like these really low tones that are severally mixed in. Sound like maybe double bass. Like these rich organic textures. I don't know if it's like guitar or mandolin thrown in, but it's like a very low key track, but it's still engaging. If you just kind of get lost in it, you can. Um, I thought that was a nice track. And then I guess you kind of get into the meat and potatoes of the album after this because Chinese Satellite is another good track. It's probably very similar to what I'd say Julian Baker's style is. Um, it has like this strummed electric guitar, a nice weird electronic effect in the voice, this really wet drum sound that fits in nicely into the mix. The song has moments that are lush with string textures. It has like this U2-esque like guitar line in there as the track develops. That Chinese Satellite was quite nice. Moon Song was interesting too. That was the next track. There's like this washed out drum track in the mix. The voices in this track just sound like they're floating lightly, like stuff that's blowing in the wind on a windy day. Um, this track, in my opinion, was probably the most derivative of, uh, I guess, various artists. It sounds like Bon Iver at times, but it really just sounds like a more subdued version of Maisie Star's Fall Into You, that song from the 90s. It's not a bad song, but I just kind of noticed that. And there's like this kind of adult alternative vibe going on with a spacey twist at times in the album. That's just something I noticed. And then two tracks over after that, we have ICU. This is probably the most, this track right here, it's very reliant on the vocal chorus and the hook where she says, I feel something. That's the part that I tend to gravitate more towards. This track is, I guess, very opposite of what I feel Phoebe Bridgers does the best, and I'll get to that here in a sec. It's so what this track does is it has like this steady mechanical sound to it, and that's due to like this eighth note rhythmic idea that's just constant in the song that drives it. And it's a bit different from like the loose and exposed singer songwriter style that she does best in. Um, Maybe this track, like the climactic part that it builds up to, it could have used a little bit more power to it. And I don't know if it was a production choice, but I don't know if it was just done that way because it was supposed to cover up her voice, or they tried not to cover up her voice. And maybe that's why they didn't want the mix, like in the instruments, to like be as strong. But I feel like that's what the track needed. Um, and maybe that's just because her vocal tone is a little thin, but that's why her voice works better in like these folky exposed like tracks where there's like organic instrumentation, acoustic stuff, which brings us to Graceland 2, which is probably one of the best songs on the album. It has like this organic folk aesthetic. It's probably the most folky song on the album. It sounds almost like country as well. And like it has these mandolin sounds and with strings. There's a lyrical sung motif that reoccurs a lot in the vocals. And I think sometimes simpler works better for Phoebe because she does have like this angelic voice. But I think for it to shine, it needs to have something that's light underneath. Um, and then we have the closing track, I Know the End. Well, this one is an interesting track because it's long and it develops a lot. It has like this storytelling quality. It has like a lot of geographical references, that kind of thing. Um, I like the chorus effect in the guitar that leads the track into like this transitional part. It develops quite nicely with like these accentuated guitar quarter notes. Um, it has a very compositional, grandiose quality, like almost musical theater like, because the ending is quite large. There's like a lot of layers and textures and a lot of craziness. Even Phoebe Bridgers screams at the very end, and it's a great ending to this album. I feel like this song kind of uh, is a saving grace at times for this album. Not that this album was bad, but uh, without it, I know the end and just something else thrown in, I feel like this album would have been a lot different. Um, but yeah, overall, I'm feeling like this was a good album for Phoebe Bridgers. It's obviously getting positive reviews, and I think deservedly so. I think this is a strong 7 out of 10. Um, there's some things on here that I think kind of uh, were, I guess, repeated like in Stranger in the Alps. That dichotomy between whether she wants to be like this, this folk artist, or like this like indie pop queen or something like that. But I think that kind of works because she's probably not going to be any of those. She's probably just going to be her own thing. Like I said earlier in the review, she seems like she's probably on her way to just be this kind of juggernaut that can really just do whatever sound she wants, and people are going to listen to it, and it's going to work. So yeah, I dug this album. I'm excited to see what happens next, or she goes back to Boy Genius, she does more Better Oblivion, just does some more, uh, quirky projects. But yeah, I think she's a great artist. Check this album out, whether you listen to her or not. You're probably gonna end up liking something. And yeah, that's the end of the review. Thanks for joining me. If you made it all the way to the end, I'm Josh, and I'll be reviewing some more music soon.